What makes the difference somebody telling a story and then someone really conveying that story with authority and with power? What makes the difference?
Well, there's a lot of things that go into making a difference. Oftentimes, what we have is bits of truth. We have bits of information. And the client is quite often in a really difficult position. They've gone through a very traumatic experience. They're healing from their injuries. They don't understand their story. They don't know how to tell that with authority. And that's where a great legal team can make a huge difference. Is we take time to get to know our clients. We take time to discover that story, to dig deep, to understand what the elements are that the client may not understand.
Welcome to the 805 Law Group Podcast, your source for an entertaining blend of law and legal community updates. Each week, you'll get crucial insights into family law, personal injury, criminal defense, and estate planning, along with the latest insider information about what's happening in the local legal community and high-profile cases right here on the Central Coast. Now let's get started with your host, the founder of 805 Law Group, attorney Bill Osman. Welcome to another episode of the 805 Law Group Podcast. We're your hosts. I'm Dean Mignola.
And I'm Bill Osman, the founder of 805 Law Group.
Excellent. Today, we're going to be talking about a powerful secret to winning your personal injury case, and it's called telling your story with authority. Now, some people may not be familiar with that concept, Bill. Maybe explain it a little bit to them.
That's a great question, Dean. There's something incredibly powerful about telling the story and telling a story that's real and that people can understand and relate to. And when you speak truth to power, magical things happen, Dean.
Okay. Now, how does that apply, especially to personal injury cases, especially in the context of negotiations and court proceedings, things like that?
What I found, Dean, is that telling a great story, understanding the story, digging deep and finding out what that story really is and telling it throughout the process, it's amazing how things happen. It's really powerful when you know the story. You tell it with authority and authenticity. Throughout the process, I've seen amazing and wonderful things happen, both at mediation, when you tell that to opposing counsel, and ultimately, when you get the opportunity to tell it to a jury, incredible things happen because people know it's the truth, and it just has a biological advantage when you speak truth to power.
Now, what are the important concepts when telling a story and telling truth to power? How do what makes the difference somebody telling a story and then someone really conveying that story with authority and with power? What makes the difference?
Well, there's a lot of things that go into making a difference. Oftentimes, what we have is bits of truth. We have bits of information, and the client is quite often in a really difficult position. They've gone through a very traumatic experience. They're healing from their injuries. They don't understand their story. They don't know how to tell that with authority. And that's where a great legal team can make a huge difference. Is we take time to get to know our clients. We take time to discover that story, to dig deep, to understand what the elements are that the client may not understand. And certainly the other side is not wanting to see or even understand. They're just looking for reasons to reject that story, to reject that claim. So we take the time. We take the time to get to understand our client, understand their situation, their circumstances, and the events that led up to whatever the outcome is and what our client is dealing with. So we take the time to discover the story, find out the most powerful elements of that story, and then recreate that story so it is succinct, it's understandable, and it's something that is powerful at every step of the litigation.
Okay. Can you give us an example of where that ability to tell the story with authority has made a difference in a personal injury case?
Yeah, there's lots of great examples. And so first of all, we take that information, we look at it, we take the time to recreate it. And then where that makes a difference is we'll learn that story. We'll take it to mediation. We've had lots of situations where we've been able to very powerfully tell that story in mediation, show it to the mediator, show it to opposing counsel, show it to the adjuster. And they look at that and go, oh, that is powerful. Let's see if we can get this settled. Great and powerful preparation and ability to tell that story with authority and authenticity will often get them to open up their checkbook and pay at different points throughout the litigation process. And if we're not able to turn heads there at mediation, we can continue to move that forward to a jury trial, where ultimately 12 of your peers will decide. And that is really important, to have a powerful story that's told with simplicity and authenticity.
Okay. Now, from the client's perspective, what can they do to make sure that they and their attorney are able to tell the story in the most powerful way possible?
Well, it's really important that you have an attorney, a legal team that really cares about your situation, that can empathize, that's going to take the time to learn your story and dig deep. Go to the accident scene, go to the information and dig deep on that, and spend time with your loved ones that are most impacted by your injuries, so that they can discover that story and be able to tell that with power and authority.
Okay. Does evidence play a role in this? Is it being specific about specific items of evidence? Does that make a difference in telling the story?
It does. I mean, evidence is important, but what we found is oftentimes when we dig deep, we understand the story, we understand the client and what they've gone through and their loved ones and what they've gone through. We discover evidence that will really change the outcome of a given case. The other side is pushing evidence that supports their story, that supports their denial of a liability, deny damages. And so in discovering the story, we often discover evidence that can change outcomes and really change the future of our clients, which what we're ultimately looking for is to make a huge difference in our clients' lives.
Okay, so what you're saying is the evidence is important, but how you frame that evidence is also very important.
Both are very important, Dean. One, to find the evidence that will make a difference. And two, how you tell that story. You can have the same set of evidence and people see it from completely different viewpoints. The adjuster, the insurance company, the government is going to be looking at it one way. How do I deny liability? How do I get out of this? How do I give the smallest dollars possible to make this go away? And then your average attorney will just line up some facts and circumstances and try to get it out of the way. But if you go to the nth degree, if you get in there and you learn your client's story, if you understand the elements, you can tell that with authenticity. If you can discover what the true story and the true reasons are, then you have something that's incredibly powerful and you can maximize value in your case and deliver that. And what is amazing is to be able to see how that changes people's lives in a very positive way for the rest of their lives.
I know, unlike a lot of attorneys, you're quite the trial lawyer. Are you enjoying the 805 Law Group podcast so far? Make sure you never miss an episode by hitting that subscribe button now. This podcast is made possible by listeners like you. Thank you for your support. For more information about 805 Law Group, visit our website, 805lawgroup.com. Now, let's get back to the show. You spent a lot of time on cases in trial, And can you explain how an attorney's communication skills and their ability to speak confidently, how that can really make a difference in a case?
Absolutely. It's really important to be able to not only tell a story, but be comfortable in telling that story, really taking the time to learn that story. And so it matters throughout the process. What we do is we relate as individuals to story. Since the
Hmm.
beginning of man, that's how we've learned our history. That's how we've learned our culture. That's how we learn of the legends. That's how we are vested in our religion and our faith and even our legal system. And so really learning a story and being able to tell that every step of the way is incredibly important. It makes a difference to the jury. It makes a difference to each of the players as you go about trying to get the best results possible for your client.
Yeah, I find this really interesting. What makes a great storyteller? You can see it when you see somebody who tells a great story, but what are the qualities? I mean, obviously you're a great storyteller. That's something that you use in your cases. What what really ups the game of a story?
What ups a game of a story is really understanding the elements of that story. One, understanding the subject, and then learning how to tell it. And that quite often is telling and retelling that story and getting feedback so that you can take out the things that are not important, that don't drive the story, and that's not powerful. So quite often you look at the story structure, you look at the elements, the most important elements that are going to make a difference to the listener. And that's actually practicing it before your peers, practicing it with a group. We practice it right here at 805 Law Group consistently. And I actually work with other attorneys and work groups, and I get the pleasure of listening to some of these stories and helping these attorneys tell those stories with more power, more authenticity, and it helps them get amazing results for their client.
Now, there are obviously different phases in a case, different phases in a trial. Does the story and the way you tell the story, does that change in the different phases of the case?
Absolutely. Throughout the trial, you're telling stories in voir dire, you're getting authentic reactions and participation. You're telling that story in your mini opening. You're telling that story in your opening statement. You're telling that story when you do direct examination. You're telling that story in cross examination. And so ultimately, you do tell that story also in closing argument,
Mhm.
but that's only the last story that the jury's going to hear. They hear a series of stories all throughout the jury presentation until they finally get the entire story, which is simply a series of stories which they can understand, they can relate to, they understand is authentic and is speaking to them. It speaks to them at an emotional level, speaks to them at a logical level, and they understand it as the truth, and they can make a proper decision at that point.
And the reality is, let's face it, a lot of people, and in this case, a lot of attorneys, really don't know how to tell a story. They just maybe give the facts and count on that to really, win the day. But that's not good enough, is it?
No, absolutely not. We live in a legal world. And having gone to law school, they train you on motions, on the law, of memorizing the law, of the importance of briefing, of the importance of all of these legal requirements. And really, all these legal requirements create a barrier. This is a huge barrier. And oftentimes, it doesn't allow the lawyer to relate to people in a real and authentic manner. So there's a problem with the law, and that it's a fundamental problem, and it's building walls and it's building barriers. And I think that defense counsel quite often will try to take advantage of these. But a good plaintiff's attorney not only understands how to lower those barriers, but actually speak to people in a real and authentic manner and be able to talk to people in real and plain language it's ultimately important that they hear you, they understand you, and they understand that's the truth.
Okay. Well, the person who's looking for a personal injury attorney or a law firm, how can they know that this attorney, this law firm really has that ability to give them that extra edge in the whole context of storytelling, for example?
Yes, it's very important. It's very important that you know that your firm understands the story, that's going to take the time to get to know their clients. They're going to get to pull back the layers of the onion to get to the heart of the matter. And so it is important to find people that are not just speaking in legal jargon, but can speak to a person in a very real and open and honest way. It's really important that you find someone that has experience in telling stories and understanding what the truth of the situation is.
Okay, excellent. Well, that's going to wrap up this episode of the 805 Law Group podcast. And Bill, do you have any final words for people before we let them go?
Yeah. I just want to, put out that personal invite. We're here on the Central Coast. We've been living with you and alongside you for a very long time. So our coffee pot's on. If you want to come in and get to know us a little better, we'd love for you to swing by and get to know us even better.
Excellent. Well, if you like this content, sure hope that you hit the like button and subscribe or follow, depending on whatever platform that you're on. And also, there's a little bell. If you can look for that, click on that. That'll notify you when future podcasts from us are coming up. And we really appreciate you watching and listening. And we'll see you on the next podcast. Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning into this week's episode of the 805 Law Group podcast. Don't forget to visit our website, 805lawgroup.com/podcast, where you can subscribe to the show on iTunes, Spotify, or Amazon Music, so you never miss an episode. If you found value in the show, we'd love it if you could rate it on iTunes or even tell your friends. Make sure to join attorney Bill Osman next week for another informative and entertaining episode. Remember, at 805 Law Group, we're turning law into empowerment, one episode at a time.